Shalom. This was a day that Yossi, or Brother Joe as he was now known, had dreaded for his last 9 years. He knew this day would come, and he had thought about it every night for the last 9 years. Even with all that time, he wasn't prepared for the emotions overcoming him at the moment. Standing in front of the large wall he knew as the kid as the kotel, Yossi felt his knees go weak and thought he would faint at any moment. Yossi grew up like any other modern Orthodox teenager. He attended Jewish day schools and went to Israel for a gap year of study. He had visited Israel no less than 10 times before he spent a year in a Jerusalem yeshiva. It was when he arrived at his university that things began to change. No longer cocooned in his insular community, Yossi began experimenting. As Yossi developed a new group of friends, he attended events he could never have imagined even existed. One night, Yossi, he had now switched to Joe, it was just easier, went to a meeting at a retreat a few miles away from campus. There was group singing, good food, and a warm and embracing atmosphere. Joe appreciated the friendship and love that this group shared with one another. All the pressures he felt at school sort of melted away each time when he came back to this retreat. Joe kept returning, and while some wanted him to stay away, even calling the group a cult, Joe was in love with his new friends, as they called themselves the Brotherhood of the King. One day, the head of the Brotherhood approached Joe and asked if he'd like to become a member. Joe had studied, sang, and done everything else members do, so why not join? Joe understood that joining the Brotherhood was no small commitment. To become a brother meant subscribing to everything the brothers stood for, living with them, and essentially divesting from the outside world. It meant worshiping in a way his parents, teachers, and rabbis would have considered idolatry. The Brotherhood regularly communicated with the dead, bowed to idols, and carried out other superstitious practices. Other than an annual pilgrimage to a different location for a spiritual brotherly renewal, brothers essentially stayed on the retreat campus all year. With a restless night's thought, Joe decided to stay, and the next day Joe became Brother Joe. In the past 9 years, Brother Joe felt he had grown with the group, becoming one with them. He had attended 8 spiritual brotherly renewals to places like Tibet, the Nile, and even Antarctica. Today, though, Brother Joe stood with his fellow brothers of the King at the Western Wall, here behind me. Joe didn't tell his brothers of his past as Yossi, someone who knew the ins and outs of this wall and its plaza. As Joe stood at the kotel, the past 9 years rushed by him all at once, and while he was watching them in fast forward, he could see it in slow motion. Joe realized that in joining the Brotherhood, he had done more than joining a new group. He had rejected his past and his old one. He now understood the verse from this week's Sedra, so confusing to him all these years, that talked about various forms of superstition and called their practitioners an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving your practitioners from before you. Of course God considered Joe and his brothers an abomination. At the foundation of superstitious acts that man performs is a choice to reject God and his path, the Torah. Joe hadn't simply taken on some superstitious practices. He had made a decision to walk away from God. While the Torah's laws on superstition might seem minute, they all stem from one major concept: commitment to God. Now, as he stood in front of the kotel, Brother Joe felt like Yossi again, and he began to reconsider his choices. Shabbat Shalom.